Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new tutorial here on our YouTube channel. Today we're gonna talk about how to produce a pop rock song, and my example for today is gonna be Timebelle with the song $1. Let's listen to the final result first, and then we're gonna start talking about the song.
This song's about you, old friend. Just keep listening until you understand there's some consequences for what you done to my brain. I think I'm gonna lock you in a cellar till you feel all the pain inflicted on me, all the pain inflicted on me. And I think I'm gonna cut you into pieces, put some salt on all your bruises, just like you did, just like you did. 'Cause if I had $1 for every time it hurt, you'd be surprised I'd be so rich, wasting time on my own bitching. If I had $1 for every time you screamed I am nothing but a bitch, I would be so fucking rich, rich, rich. I'd be so rich, yeah. But I bet you still think I'm a bitch, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm not just a poet's old friend.
Okay, so that's the song. So now let's talk about the drums. I started with the kick, and more or less is the same kick that I used on the verse and on the chorus as well. The only difference is that kind of on the chorus, I bring a new kick in just for kind of the mid-high part. On the verse, I also added the low-pass filter, just so you can feel that the song kind of grows from the beginning until the mid part of the song and towards the end also. This is more or less the verse, and now on the chorus it sounds like this. Also, as you noticed, the pattern changes as well. It makes it more dynamic. So at the beginning you have that 4 on the floor kick, gives you the rhythm, but then on the chorus, because everything takes kind of off, I used a different pattern for the kicks as well. So a very important thing here is that I try to make the kicks not to fight with each other, because otherwise, you might have some phasing issues, some cancellation issues, especially in the low section. So it's something that you really, really want to avoid. So for the second kick that comes in the chorus, I cut the lows like quite drastically, everything under 100, 120, and also I adjusted my kick and my mid part of the kick, of the new kick that comes in, to kind of stay focused in the kind of low mid section more than on the high section. And just for you to kind of see the difference, I will bypass the EQ on the second kick. Now, because I did this low cut, it helps kind of the other kick's low frequency range to come forward, because otherwise they would have cancelled each other out. Regarding the snares, I have 2 layers of snares and also a clap after. The snare sounds like this. As you can see, I have the main snare, and on top of that, I have another one just to kind of bring a bit of a dimension space-wise and depth-wise as well. But then I'm bringing also the clap on top of that, very subtle, because I needed that stereo image of the entire pack of snares and claps. So together you see that they actually sound also in front Also, they have a dimension, so you have information more in the back, and you also have that stereo width of the entire pack. So let's listen one more time. The first snare has also a spiff on it. I'm a huge fan of it because it works not only as an EQ, or it doesn't necessarily boost the frequencies, but it also kind of creates those transients that help a snare cut through the mix. So let's listen how the snare sounded before the spiff and after. I think it's just a huge difference, especially because now it kind of gives a good body to the snare. As you can see, even the preset that I used, it's snare add body. So yeah, it's all about focusing around the body. Otherwise, the snare would have been too high mid-ish, and it was something that I didn't want necessarily. And it would have created a huge gap between the kick and the snare. We would lack those kind of low mid frequencies in the drum section. So this way I kind of compensated and I added the body to the snare. So the entire groove and entire drum section sounds full. I also have a snare effects, just to kind of lift the energy up. You hear me saying this quite often, I mean, it's all about the energy in general, especially for these genres. So yeah, I used here a snare that I kind of, it's hard to say actually that it's a snare, it's more like an alarm thing. But yeah, I mean, it just sounded proper for this one. So without all the effects, it sounded a bit too upfront. It was too annoying frequency-wise. So more or less, I added an altar boy just to change the pitch, also to bring it to the key of the song. I added the lo-fi, just to kind of dim a bit the high frequencies and to tame them. I also added the Seventh Heaven, just to bring a bit more dimension to this effects. Then I added the compressor, a Pro Q3 just to cut the low frequencies that I didn't need, and another compressor just to kind of control better the entire chain. Then we have the hi-hats. As you can hear, it's a loop that includes the kick as well. I love the fact about this loop that kind of the hi-hats were really, really saturated. They sounded rich, they sounded a bit dirty, So I wanted just to control them a bit better, and also to kind of tame down the frequencies that I didn't need. So more or less I cut all the low frequencies because I actually didn't need it. Then I added a smack attack just to kind of trim the sustain because again, I didn't need that long release for this kind of snares. An autopan, again, just to play around with the stereo width of the snare. A duck, just again, to make them more groovy and more appropriate for this particular song. A lo-fi, just I kind of downsized the sample to 22 bits, and I increased a bit the distortion and the saturation on them, just to give that extra layer of kind of dirtiness in a way. And also an R-comp at the very end, just to kind of control like the dynamics better. So before and after. Then I also have my tombs here. I mean, nothing too special. Some nice tomb grooves that are from Splice. Because they were a bit too aggressive and they didn't suit the song. I mean, I didn't want to make the song too rockish. I still wanted to have that pop vibe. I kind of tamed everything down. For the first layer of tombs, I added an EQ, an autopan again, just to play around with the stereo width, and a dock, again, just to kind of control better the groove. And also in a way to avoid having the tombs fighting with the kick. Then for the second layer of tombs, I actually went in more drastic. I literally cut the sustain really, really aggressively. Then I played around with the EQ. I really wanted to get rid of the lows and the highs, just to kind of have the entire tomb section focused more on the low mid part. An autopan just to play around with the dimension again. And the dock, I used it again for the same purpose, to avoid having the tombs fighting with the kick. I have a nice fill that I used from Splice. And then I have my rides, my cymbals, my crashes section. As you can see here, I have my 4 crashes all layered up. I was looking for a specific sonic sound, and I was able to achieve it like this. I was really aware of what I was doing, even though sometimes, you might end up, using like 2 crashes. But in this particular situation, I like the sound. I like the way it sounded like this, so I stick to it. Let's quickly talk about the percussion section as well, and then we're going to start listening to the drum and percussion section all together. So I have a metallic percussion that actually brings a nice groove to the entire pack. You'll see that I process them differently on the verse and on the chorus. So because on the verse I'm lacking the hi-hats, the whole groove is kind of built around the kick, the toms, and I needed that high pattern groove because otherwise the entire drum section on the verse would have been like too dark, too focused around the low mids, and we wouldn't have like any contrast, So this was my contrast element. So again, I have a filter. I have a smack attack just to kind of reduce the sustain, then an auto pan, and then a reverb. For the chorus part, because already were other elements in the mid frequency coming in, I decided to also use the lo-fi on the same groove just to kind of get rid of those mid frequencies that were fighting with each other and with the vocal as well, and also just to give room for the hi-hats as well. So I used the smack attack again just to kind of get rid of the release because I didn't need it. I had other elements to have that kind of a release part there. And I wanted everything to be like really punchy and really like dynamic. And then I have the lo-fi. Again, I just increased the distortion 0.1 because you can feel it, and the saturation 0.3. This plugin is quite drastic and you can feel each 0.1 added. Then I have my tambourines. They are panned to the right as well, just kind of not to fight with the groove and just to kind of make the whole drum section a bit wider. And also I used here as well the lo-fi because I really wanted like the entire drum pack to sound a bit more trashy in a way, more raw, more kind of distorted, more saturated, just to give that kind of an oomph to the entire song. And I also have the shaker that's panned to the left, so this way it doesn't fight with the tambourine groove. And together they sound like this. Same thing with the shaker. I used, again, the distortion and the saturation just to kind of make them a bit more raw. And this way, they don't stand out too much, but they still have the groove. So the entire drum and percussion section sounds like this. Awesome. Now I also have my FXs here. Even though they are more specific to EDM kind of tracks, I use them here as well because I wanted to play around with the energy as well, just to kind of feel the transition from a verse to the pre-chorus to the chorus. So yeah, I just used them here and they worked as well. Okay, now let's talk about the bass. In this particular case, bass-wise, I used the Trillion. It was a good option. I was able, to achieve what I was aiming for. I'm also a guitar player and a bass player myself. But in this particular case, I didn't need to use the guitar or to record it properly because the Trillion bass sounded really good. And yeah, it also sounded fresh. As you can see, the preset is a studio bass. I usually tweak the presets. I never kind of leave them as they come because I still need to adjust them for my song and for this particular case. So I more or less played again with the release, I think, or with the decay and also with the sound a bit. And then I committed to it, because it's really, really important to commit to the stuff that you're doing in the end, because otherwise you can keep on doing and overdoing stuff that when it's actually not needed, So I just committed to it. Now let's talk about the guitars. So when I started the production, I actually used the guitars from Contact, and in the end I still decided to use them and to have them there in the background, even though we also recorded some amazing guitars. So this is how it sounded when I actually added the guitar, the really dry one. Then I added the green screamer, which is a go-to plugin when it comes to guitar, especially for the distorted one, of course. The one that I'm using is from Plugin Alliance. Also an EQ just to kind of take down the low information, and another EQ that I use for the filter purpose. As you can see here in the first part of the chorus, I wanted to bring the guitars in the filter a bit, just to kind of take everything down before the actually drop and the post-chorus comes back. Distortion from the green screamer is actually amazing. And then I have another guitar that I used, same thing from Contact, but now it actually is kind of double speed. So more or less these were the guitars that I started with. And then I asked my friend Radu to actually record some amazing guitars, the proper ones. So he did an amazing job. And just to show you what he did, the entire guitar section sounds like this. So as you can see, we have lots of layers of guitars. I really wanted to make sure that they fill out the space really well, that they bring a lot of energy to the track. And this is kind of what gives that entire, pop rock feeling to the song. So let me show you each guitar pattern, track by track. So we have the main guitar that actually drives the entire harmonic part and also rhythm part. And this is on the verse. And then on the pre-chorus, another guitar comes in the first part and another one in the second part as well. This way the song kind of builds really nice, but also in a natural and organic way. We didn't add stuff there just for the sake of adding stuff, We made sure that the song builds, and it kind of brings fresh elements, but in a very natural way. So this is what happens with the guitars in the verse part. It was really important to kind of build it, then to drop it down in the first part of the chorus, and then to bring it again with even more elements, When you're working on a song in general, this is a very important element to kind of know how to play around with the dynamics and with the elements, to kind of bring in some stuff, then to drop them, then to bring them again, or even kind of in a different way, just so you actually have some development happening through the song, that it doesn't bore people, Then we also have some nice clean guitars. And then an important thing that we wanted to add underneath the post-chorus, even though we already had the vocal melody there that was quite catchy, we wanted to add kind of a counter melody. As you can hear, it's quite catchy, and together with the vocal, they created a nice melody. Then I have my key section. I use the piano from Analog Lab. And on top of the piano, I also used the pad, same thing from Analog Lab, just to make sure that the harmonic element is there. And I used the FabFilter Pro Q3 just to cut out the frequencies that I was not using, to be honest, and the dock, also for that groove, just to kind of have that pumping effect. Even though it's common to use it in the EDM scene, but I mean, it worked here as well. Then on the post-chorus, I also brought in a synth. I used Serum in this particular case, and I used the SY Ghost synth. It's just an amazing synth that actually kind of gave us that extra layer of like energy. Then I added the piano as well. I used the black box on it. I used the green screamer. I used the Seventh Heaven for a reverb. The R-comp, again, to compress it really, really hard. An EQ, again, just to narrow down the frequencies that I want to use. An imager, just to kind of make sure that the piano stays in the right spectrum. And then the Pro Tools EQ, just to make sure that I can do the filter effect on the first part of the chorus and then on the post-chorus again. On the last chorus, I also brought in another synth that I usually do it from arcade, and I feel like it's really, really fresh, and also you feel that it brings another element towards the end just to kind of, keep things exciting. I added the dock just for the pump effect. I used an R-comp again. I compressed it really, really hard. I used the auto-tune because this sound had a little bit of detuning happening there, so I decided to put an auto-tune on it just to fix this issue. And then the Pro Q again just to cut out all the low frequencies. Then I used arcade again, more exactly the hooked section, just to create this kind of vocal effects that I'm always doing. I processed them by using the auto-tune. Then I added an alter boy, just to kind of take the pitch up and to change the format, and also to add the drive a little bit, to create a little bit of distortion. The black box on top, again, for more saturation. The EQ, just to kind of narrow down the frequencies that I don't need because I didn't want this element to fight with the vocal. And I have the Seventh Heaven, for the same purpose as always, just nice reverb. The dock, the compressor, and an EQ, again, just to kind of play around with the filter. This EQ that I'm using for the Pro Tools all the time, when I put it at the very end of my chain, is always for the filter purpose and for automations in general, because I need it maybe in the verse to kind of have a little bit of a low cut, the high cut, depending on the song, and then through the song maybe to open up, or just for other kind of interesting ear candy effect. Okay, so now let's talk about the vocals. Miruna has an amazing vocal, so it's always fun to work with her. In this particular case, I recorded the vocals with her on a Telefunken TF47. It's an amazing mic that really suits well her vocals. And then after the recording, we comped the vocals and we choose the right one for this song. After doing that, I used Melodyne just to make sure that I fix minor pitch issues, because Miruna, she's a really, really good singer and she doesn't need too much of a Melodyne on her voice. But because I'm picky and I always try to kind of make sure that everything is on point, I used Melodyne again on her voice as well. And then on top of that, I added an auto-tune just, to make sure that everything is on point. After that, I added an alter boy, but in this particular case, I didn't use it for the pitch or for the format. I actually used it for the drive. Because it's a pop rock song, this drive knob really helped me achieve a more saturated voice. After that, I added just a Pro Q3, just again to do some minor adjustments. And then a smack attack, even though it's something that I'm not using usually on the vocals, but in this particular case, I wanted her release to be shorter. On the verse, we used only one lead vocal, and then the backing vocal comes in on the pre-chorus.
All the pain you inflicted on me, all the pain you inflicted on me, and I think I'm gonna...
Then on the chorus, we just used the same lead vocal, but also panned left and right, just to kind of give a bigger dimension to the vocal.
$1 for every time it hurt, you'd be surprised. I'd be so rich, wasting time on my own bit.
On the second chorus, we did a different ad-lib, just to kind of lift up the energy again more.
Cause if I had $1 for every time it hurt, you'd be surprised.
So as you can see, I'm sending the vocals in separate buses. The lead vocals in one bus, those additional backing vocals on another bus, and then the ad-libs on another bus as well. As you can see here in the project, we have some vocals that we didn't use, all kind of ad-libs that Miruna recorded, but in the end we decided just to stick to few of them. You know, less is more, so in the end, even though they sounded nice, we felt like it would have been like too much, so we decided not to use them. Okay, so now let's talk about the buses. So on the vocal FX bus, I have only a compressor, a reverb and a delay send. Nothing too specific, you know, it's quite wet as you can see. And then I have an H comp on the drum bus. I used it just to kind of add punch to the entire drum section, as you can see here, but then I use it in a parallel way. Then on the percussion bus, I have only an EQ, just to make sure that after the entire processing, there is no kind of low information added. And here on the bass, it gets more fun. I added the Little Labs Vogue. It's really good to kind of, you know, boost those really low frequencies. I added an EQ, nothing too special to be honest, a compressor just to kind of control better the dynamics, an EQ, the Vertigo just for the saturation and for the distortion of the bass. Then I added the max bass just to kind of increase the frequencies between like, I don't know, 64, 250 and more. Then I added the Pro Q3 just for the sidechain purpose of it. So every time the kick hits, it takes down those low frequencies from the bass, just so this way kind of the kick hits harder. And then the compressor, you know, just to kind of control better again the dynamics. On the FX bus, just an EQ, a compressor, nothing specific. On the guitar bus, again a compressor, an EQ after. I usually do that just to kind of make sure that after I process individually each track, I control the entire pack, you know, better for the mixing purpose. On the keys, I use an EQ just to boost the really high frequencies. Then I use the LA2 from Teletronics, from the UADs. Usually I would use the silver one, but in this particular case, this one just did a good job. On the vocal bus, I have the channel strip, the EQ, just to cut out the low frequencies, the stutter, I always use it on vocals. As you can see, not too drastically, you know, just a little bit of an input, an output just to control better the gain staging. The C4 for the multiband purpose. The Pro Q, again, just, you know, to control better the frequencies. The LA2 silver, as I said before, this is the one that I'm usually using. The Soothe 2, just to control better the frequencies that kind of stand out. The Pro DS for the S's. I always make sure that I turn on the oversampling, and then I adjust the threshold and the range, depending on how drastically I want to get rid of those S's. And then at the very end, I have the distressor. This is what helps me kind of control the dynamics, you know, the vocals. As you can see here with the compressor, I really went crazy with the compression. I usually don't do it that much, but in this song, I really want the vocal to kind of stand out and to be more compressed, less dynamics, because I had other elements to play around with the dynamic field, you know. And I feel like these kind of details also make just a basic pop rock song, they turn them into a fresher one, you know, kind of a 2022, 2023. Then I have the reverb send, the delay send, and then I have the dimensions and just to kind of increase the width of the vocals. I will separately do a tutorial, but I will talk more about my vocal chain as well. Regarding the master chain, I'm using the same plugins as always. If you didn't see the previous videos, you can also check them out here. And yeah, the master chain is more or less the same that I used there as well. Plugins wise, of course, I did the adjustments accordingly to the song. So I started with an SSL EQ. More or less, I boosted the high frequencies because everything was too dark. An L1 limiter, but in a subtle way. The DPR 402 that I always use just to kind of make the master more wide. The inflator, just to make sure that the saturation is on point. The master desk as well, just to make sure that I control better the treble, the presence, you know, the mids, the lows, also the compression. In this case, I also added the shadow heels as well, just to kind of glue things up. The XL-V2 from Brainwalks that I always use, you know, just for the kind of multiband purpose. Brainwalks, the V3, they always use, you know, just to kind of adjust the mids and the sides. As you can see here, I kind of took out minus 2.5 dBs from the side of the low section because it's something that I didn't need, and I felt like, you know, the sides were a bit too bassy. And I also boosted the bass up in the mid section. And then at the very end, I just used the L2. I added a 2.4 gain, and then I took out the output again, as always, to minus 0.1. Okay, so let's listen one more time to the song.
This song's about you, old friend. Just keep listening until prize. I've been so rich, wasting time on my own bitching. If I had $1 for every time you screamed, I am nothing but a bitch, I would be so fucking rich, rich, rich. I'd be so rich, yeah. But I bet you still think I'm a bitch, yeah. Oh, I'm not just a
So this is how the final result sounds like. If you like the video, make sure to share it. Hit us up in the comment section with any questions or any suggestions. You can also hit us up on Instagram. Hope you enjoyed it and see you next time.